Hello and welcome to this exploring session, and today we are looking at David and Bathsabe. We decided just now how we were going to say it. No, I've already forgotten, and it'll be fine. We'll sort it out as we go along. This is definitely going to be one of those plays. It's by George Peele that features names where we are going to put the stresses in the wrong places and get them wrong. Especially as the names are not necessarily quite what the names might be from other sources. So there is a certain amount of confusion and chaos which will ensue. But that's basically the par for the course for what we do here. We're going to be reading the first half of the play, but before we begin, I should introduce you to all these wonderful people here. So, as we go into the chaos of me trying to say these names correctly, reading today, Jethray is Stephen.
Yes, Steve Longstaffe, forgetful, senile, needs prompting somewhere in the rainy north.
Reading prologue and chorus today is
Sarah Blake. I'm an actor, writer and director living in Germany.
And reading Cusay and Adonia is
Hello, I'm Helen Good. I'm a historian.
Reading Thamar and Abyssus today is
Hello, I'm Pamela and I'm an actor based in London.
Reading Jonadab today is
Hi, I'm Tamara. I literally took a second there to realise that's the name because it looks odd on the page. I'm an actor from Germany at the moment, usually from London.
Reading Ammon is
Hi, I'm Alan Scott, based in Suffolk, not an actor.
Reading Machaas and Nathan is
Aliki, Chapple. I'm also based in the rainy north, and I'm an actor, writer, theatre maker, and translator.
Reading Hanon today is
I'm Jitka, Štollová, and I'm a junior research fellow in English literature at Trinity College, Cambridge.
Reading Absolon today is
Liza Graham, actor, singer, and Renaissance text coach to actors in London.
And reading Bathsabe is
Lynsey Beauchamp. I'm an actor. I live in Norfolk.
Reading Urias and Widow is
Hi, my name's Elizabeth Massey and I'm an author living in Romford.
Reading David today is
Hi, I'm Sascha and I'm a professional actress and performer and director and writer in Brighton in the UK.
Reading Joab today is
Hi, I'm George Andrews and I'm a professional actor, cabaret performer and clown based in London.
And reading Abyssus and Service today is
Hi, I'm Francis Cox. I'm an actor living in Amsterdam.
And I am your host, Robert Crighton. I will be attempting to keep everything moving forward in a general direction. But before we read, we do occasionally read ahead to figure out what's happening in the play, to give some warning of whether there is the need for a trigger warning. David and Bathsabe is not necessarily a cheerful play in places, but Helen, who's read the play slightly more recently than I, any warnings we need to put out?
Yes, I would say that from the start, this play contains material which will be deeply offensive to any right-thinking person.
Excellent, which is frankly where we want all drama to be going, surely. Okay, without further ado, we're going to jump straight into George Peele's opus here. And the play opens with a prologue.
Of Israel's sweetest singer now I sing, his holy style and happy victories, whose muse was dipped in that inspiring dew. Archangels still from the breath of Jove, decking her temples with the glorious flowers heavens rained on tops of Sion and Mount Sinai. Upon the bosom of his ivory root, the cherubims and angels laid their breasts, and when his consecrated fingers struck the golden wires of his ravishing heart, he gave alarum to the host of heaven that, winged with lightning, break the clouds and cast their crystal armor at his conquering feet. Of this sweet poet, Jove's musician, and of his beauteous son, I pleased sing. Then help, divine Adonia, to conduct upon the wings of my well-tempered verse the hearer's minds, above the towers of heaven, and guide them, so in this thrice haughty flight their mounting feathers scorch not with the fire, that none can temper but thy holy hand. To thee, for succour, flies my feeble muse, and at thy feet her iron pen doth use.
And draws a curtain to discover Bathsabe with her maid bathing over a spring, and she sings, and David sits above her, viewing her.
Hot sun, cool fire, tempered with sweet air, black shade, fair nurse, shadow my white hair. Shine sun, burn fire, breath air, and ease me. Black shade, fair nurse, shroud me and please me. Shadow, my sweet nurse, keep me from burning. Make not my glad cause of mourning. Let not my beauty's fire enflame unstayed desire, nor pierce any bright eye that wandereth lightly. Come, gentle zephyr, tricked with those perfumes that erst in Eden sweetened Adam's love, and stroke my bosom with the silken fan. This shade, sun-proof, is yet no proof for thee. Thy body smoother than this waveless spring, and purer than the substance of the same, can creep through that his lances cannot pierce. Thou and thy sister, soft and sacred air, goddess of life and governess of health, keeps every fountain fresh and arbour sweet. No brazen gate her passage can repulse, nor bushly thicket bar thy subtle breath. Then deck thee with thy loose, delightsome robes, and on thy wings bring delicate perfumes, to play the wantons with us through the leaves.
What tunes, what words, what looks, what wonders pierce my soul, incensed with a sudden fire. What tree, what shade, what spring, what paradise enjoys the beauty of so fair a dame? Fair Eva, placed in perfect happiness, lending her praise notes to the liberal heavens, struck with the accents of archangels' tunes, brought not more pleasure to her husband's thoughts than this fair woman's words and notes to mine. May that sweet plain that bears her pleasant weight be still enamoured with discoloured flowers, that precious fount bear sand of purest gold, and for the pebble let the silver streams that pierce earth's bowels to maintain the source play upon rubies, sapphires, chrysolites. The brims let be embraced with golden curls of moss that sleeps with sounds the waters make, for joy to feed the fount with their recourse. Let all the grass that beautifies her bower bear manna every morn instead of dew, or let the dew be sweeter far from that hangs like chains of pearls on Hanon hill, or balm which trickled from old Aaron's beard. Cusay, come up and serve thy lord the king.
And
That's
enter Cusay.
David. That line is David's. Sorry.
What's
that line is David's, that last line.
Yes, Cusay, come up and serve thy lord the king. Yes?
Yes, I said that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm going mad.
That's okay. Enter Cusay from above, potentially.
What service doth my lord the king command?
See, Cusay, say, see the flower of Israel, the fairest daughter that obeys the king. In all the land the Lord subdued to me, fairer than Isaac's lover at the well, brighter than inside bark of new hewn cedar, sweeter than flames of fine perfumed myrrh, and comelier than the silver clouds that dance on Zephyr's wings before the King of Heaven.
Is it not Bathsabe, the Hethite's wife, Urias, now at Rabbath siege with Joab?
Go now, and bring her quickly to the king. Tell her her graces have found grace with him.
I will, my lord.
And exit Cusay.
Bright Bathsabe shall wash in David's bower, in water mixed with purest almond flour, and bathe her beauty in the milk of kids. Bright Bathsabe gives earth to my desires, verdure to earth, and to that verdure flowers, to flowers sweet odours, and to odours wings that carry pleasures to the hearts of kings.
And Cusay enters now to Bathsabe, and she starting as something affright.
Fair Bathsabe, the King of Israel, from forth his princely tower hath seen thee bathe, and thy sweet graces have found grace with him. Come then, and kneel unto him where he stands. The king is gracious, and hath liberal hands.
What is Bathsabe to please the king? Or what is David, that he should desire for fickle beauty's sake his servant's wife?
David, thou know'st, fair dame, is wise and just, elected to the heart of Israel's God. Then do not thou expostulate with him for any action that contents his soul.
My lord the king, elect to God's own heart, should not his gracious jealousy incense, whose thoughts are chaste? I hate incontinence.
Woman, thou wrong'st the king and doubt'st his honour, whose truth maintains the crown of Israel, making him stay that bade me bring thee straight.
The king's poor handmaid will obey my lord.
Then come, and do thy duty to his grace, and do what seemeth favour in his sight.
And they exit, leaving David.
Now comes my lover tripping like the roe, and brings my longings tangled in her hair. To joy her love, I'll build a kingly bower, seated in hearing of 100 streams, that for their homage to her sovereign joys, shall as the serpents fold into their nests in oblique turnings, wind the nimble waves about the circles of her curious walks, and with their murmur summon easeful sleep, to lay his golden sceptre on her brows. Open the doors and entertain my love. Open, I say, and as you open, sing, welcome, fair Bathsabe, King David's darling.
And there enter Cusay with Bathsabe to David.
Welcome, fair Bathsabe, King David's darling. Thy bones fair covering, erst discovered fair, and all mine eyes with all thy beauties pierced, as heaven's bright eye burns most when he climbs the crooked zodiac with his fiery sphere, and shineth furthest from this earthly globe. So since thy beauty scorched my conquered soul, I called thee nearer for my nearer cure.
Too near, my lord, was your unarmed heart, when furthest off my hapless beauty pierced, and would this dreary day had turned to night, or that some pitchy cloud had cloaked the sun, before their lights had caused my lord to see his name disparaged, and my chastity.
My love, if want of love have left thy soul a sharper sense of honour than thy king, for love leads princes sometimes from their seats, as erst my heart was hurt displeasing thee, so come and taste thy ease with easing me.
One medicine cannot heal our different harms, but rather make both rankle at the bone. Then let the king be cunning in his cure, least flattering both perish in his hand.
Leave it to me, my dearest Bathsabe, whose skill is conversant in deeper cures. And Cusay, haste thou to my servant Joab, commanding him to send Urias home. with all the speed can possibly be used.
Cusay will fly about the king's desire.
And we'll just pause there at the end of that scene. It's interesting the way it sort of opens with a song and bathing over a spring. It sort of has a sort of, I was going to say Channel 5 soft porn epic quality to it. Though it's a bit out of date, that as a reference.
I was going to use the word pastoral, but you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe that's that. I don't think that's what's in David's head.
Actually, that word occurred to me too.
Mm.
Yes, it's quite beautiful.
Well, the song. I mean, the Peele can really write lyrics for songs. I mean, that's one thing we've really, that we've noticed with other texts as well. You know, he does write something that functions as an earworm so well.
I'm guessing they had a boy actor who could sing really well, who played the romantic female roles. I like how the song invokes the four elements and makes it makes Bathsabe's beauty an elemental thing.
Definitely.
And it's interesting because they're obviously in separate areas. That I mean, the script that I've got that suggests that David's supposed to be above and she's below, or something along those lines. That they're separate, so that what Cusay is saying to Bathsabe is not overheard by David. He's seeing that from a distance, because there is a disconnect between what is said to him and what he thinks is being said further away. And there's a whole series of things going on in this scene that seems really interesting. Thoughts from the room on that? Anyone want to leap in, or other thoughts? Aliki.
I don't know about the staging, but I'm just interested in how alert it is to the difficulties of her situation and the extent to which she's trying to maneuver, but to maintain her boundaries without outright saying, although she comes pretty close, "Get off me, you creep!"
Yeah.
As good, de-escalating is what you do in situations.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Exactly the way a woman does it.
Francis, I think you were jumping in.
Yeah, I just sort of have a technical staging question of the period. Obviously Bathsabe was played by a boy at that time, and she's bathing. So I was wondering, so how would she wouldn't have been naked, surely?
I assume not. I don't know.
Right.
It's a genuinely good question.
Yeah.
Absolutely no idea.
I mean, if they bring her in a tub.
Yeah. Or even.
I sort of imagined her, I don't know.
Careful now.
Bathing in a rock pool or a natural spring or something like that. Something very pastoral, rather than, a tub.
Yeah, it does have a sort of feeling of a shampoo commercial, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does, yeah.
It says somewhere that it's a spring.
Yeah, I'm just checking whether that's the intent of the original. From the bathing over a spring does seem to be from the original printing. So,
but she also mentions trees. Presumably, there's some foliage.
Oh right, yes. Yeah, that's how they would have done it. The boy would have been sort of discreetly shielded by leaves and branches, probably.
Well, it really does depend on the performance context. Some of these things could be quite disturbing. So, and there's a weird semi-comic beat to that moment where he says, when she comes in, I'll say, "Welcome, fair Bathsabe," and then she immediately comes in, and then he immediately says it. And there's something interesting about what's going on with who David is as well.
Well, he frames it all in this very highfalutin, high-minded fashion when all he's really done is spied on a naked woman and gone, "War!"
Yeah.
And then sent this turd Cusay to fetch her.
That's
right.
That's just before Cusay comes back with Bathsabe, I sort of had imagined it was almost kind of like a real aside, like whispered into the audience's ear, and then it becomes, you know, the bigger space which contains all of them. I'm not sure how that would be staged, though. If he's above, how they work that. So.
Well, I mean, that's an assumption of the editor I'm looking at here, and I'm wondering if it's actually the other way around. If she's above, then you can have a railing, so you only need to see that. You know, you could be seeing her from, you know, atop a waterfall. It could actually function better the other way around. I genuinely, and then she'd be closer to the musicians as well, potentially, depending on what performance space we're talking about.
I'm trying to remember the original story, and I have this vague memory, I haven't looked it up recently, that she was actually on the roof of the house, a flat roof of the house.
It was.
It was.
So I'm going to say it's more plausibly the other way around, because it actually solves staging problems that way around.
That's a painting too, isn't it? Her on the top of a house bathing.
There's a lot of paintings of her bathing.
Yeah. Again,
with David leching in the background.
Not suggesting there's any kind of an agenda there. So is. Okay.
Art, guys. Shush, it's art.
Yes. The art porn barrier there. It's very porous. So any thoughts on the prologue, actually, just very briefly, that opening prologue, which is sort of very difficult to sort of, it's a very odd opening, I found. I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts on it. Sarah, you were lucky enough to be reading it.
It seemed to me to be an entirely inappropriate prologue for a play with a biblical theme. But then we've come across like this before, haven't we, where biblical plays are not actually all that biblical. But yeah, he seemed, you know, I mean, okay, yeah, God got a couple of mentions, you know, in passing, but it was kind of, yeah, it felt like a secular prologue, really.
Well, I found it was interesting that, you know, lots of the words are lingering in a way that sort of moving towards that soft focus pastoral sense. You know, we've got bosom, breasts, there's ravishing, there's all sorts of little things that are just sort of hinting at maybe the scene that we're going to get without actually directly addressing it. And I'm just wondering on that front. Other thoughts?
It strikes me as quite Marlovian. I don't know what period green this is and whether
Peele,
one of those dudes.
Yeah.
But 1599, I think Marlowe's plays would be out there.
Oh, this is that's printing. The staging would be late 1580s, early 1590s.
That's good. That's good to know. I mean, it would be interesting if
earlier than that. Hang on. Carry on.
Anyway, it's interesting that God is referred to both as Jove and Adonai, where you'd ordinarily invoke the muse. And then there's an Icarus metaphor, so it mixes up paganism and Christianity, you know, willy-nilly, it seems to me.
We've had that sort of thing before with gratuitous references to Greek myths when the playwright feels like showing off, haven't we?
Can't immediately find a proper dating for it. It's somewhere. I'll find it eventually. We do need to move forward unless anyone has a pressing additional thought. We will crack on into the next scene and move forward with that. So, Joab, Abyssus, Urias, and others with drum and ensign.
Courage, ye mighty men of Israel, and charge your fatal instruments of war upon the bosoms of proud Ammon's sons that have disguised your king's ambassadors, cut half their beards and half their garments off. In spite of Israel and his daughters' sons, ye fight the holy battles of Jehovah. King David's God, and ours, and Jacob's God, that guides your weapons to their conquering strokes, orders your footsteps, and directs your thoughts to stratagems that harbour victory. He casts his sacred eyesight from on high and sees your foes run seeking for their deaths, laughing their labours and their hopes to scorn, while twixt your bodies and their blunted swords he puts on armour of his honour's proof, and makes their weapons wound the senseless winds.
For this city Rabbath we will lie, and shoot forth shafts as thick as and dangerous as was the hail that Moises mixed with fire, and threw with fury round about the fields, devouring Pharaoh's friends and Egypt's fruits.
First, mighty captains, Joab and Abyssus, let us assault and scale this tall tower, where all their conduits and their fountains are. Then we may easily take the city too.
Well hath Urias counselled our attempts, and as he spake us, so assault the tower. Let Hanon now, the king of Ammon's son, repulse our conquering passage if he dare.
And enter Hanon with King Machaas and others upon the walls.
Why would the shepherd's dogs of Israel snatch from the mighty issue of King Ammon, valiant Ammonese and haughty Syrians? 'Tis not your late successive victories can make us yield, or quail our courages. But if ye dare essay to scale this tower, our angry swords shall smite ye to the ground, and venge our losses on your hateful lives.
Hanon, thy father Nahas gave relief to holy David in his hapless exile, lived his fixed date, and died in peace. But thou, instead of reaping his reward, hath trod it underfoot, and scorned our king. Therefore thy days shall end with violence, and to our swords thy vital blood shall cleave.
Hence, thou that bearest poor Israel's shepherd's hook, the proud lieutenant of that base-born king, and keep within the compass of his fold. For if ye seek to feed on Ammon's fruits and stray into the Syrians' fruitful meads,
who can endure these pagans' blasphemies?
My soul repines at this disparagement.
Assault, ye valiant men of David's host, and beat these railing dastards from their doors.
And yes, there's an assault, and they win the tower, and Joab speaks alone.
Thus have we won the tower, which we will keep, maugre the sons of Ammon and of Syria.
Enter Cusay beneath.
Where is Lord Joab, leader of the host?
Here is Lord Joab, leader of the host. Cusay, come up, for we have won the hold.
In happy hour then is Cusay come.
What news then brings Lord Cusay from the king?
His Majesty commands thee out of hand to send him home Urias from the wars, for matter of some service he should do.
'Tis for no choler hath surprised the king, I hope, Lord Cusay, gainst his servant's truth.
No, rather to prefer Urias' truth.
Here, take him with thee then, and go in peace. And tell my lord the king that I have fought against the city Rabbath with success, and scaled where the royal palace is, the conduit heads and all their sweetest springs. Then let him come in person to these walls, with all the soldiers he can bring besides, and take the city as his own exploit, lest I surprise it and the people give the glory of the conquest to my name.
We will, Lord Joab, and great Israel's God bless in thy hands the battles of our king.
Farewell, Urias. Haste away the king.
As sure as Joab breathes breaths of victory, Urias will haste him and his own return.
And exit Cusay and Urias.
Let us descend and ope the palace gates, taking our soldiers in to keep the hold.
Let us, Abyssus, and ye sons of Judah, be valiant and maintain your victory.
And we'll just pause there as they all exit. It's all got very exciting, isn't it?
Yeah.
All this stuff going on. You know, the capture a tower, that's always nice stuff. Second time, just a note, we've had a couple of breaths rather than breathes. So just note that seems to be a copying error that we've consistently missed. So just be aware of that for the future. If he has a relatively small vocabulary, it might turn up again. What's going on there? Who's fighting whom and for why? Does it matter? Is
No.
possibly another question.
They're all foreigners. What does it matter?
But the interesting point is that Joab could have an outright victory, but he's going to hold off so that David can appear and wave his sword a bit, and then it be recorded that it was David's victory.
So it's undermining the official account, perhaps, sort of thing, or it's creating an official account of
It's creating an official account. I mean, they know who the boss is.
As in the previous scene. It does not argue past a certain point. So.
Yes, these people have learned from previous plays. So the dating I've got for this is about 1593. They've learned not to argue with the king. I don't know. They might not have learned later on. Who knows? But you know, that seems to be they know where they're at. It's an interesting question how long the fight goes on for. They seem to get up quite quickly. That moment when Cusay says he comes and he goes up, there's no lines to cover that movement. So that I find quite odd, structurally. Any other thoughts? We'll move further into the action. Okay. So next scene, Ammon, Jonadab, Jethray, and Ammon's page enter.
Which means, my lord, the king's beloved son that wears upon his right triumphant arm the power of Israel for royal favour, that holds upon the tables of his hands banquets of honour and all thoughts content, to suffer pale and grisly abstinence, to sit and feed upon his fainting cheeks and suck away the blood that cheers his looks.
Ah, Jonadab, it is my sister's looks, on whose sweet beauty I bestow my blood, that makes me look so amorously lean, a beauty having seized upon my heart, so merrily consecrate to her content, sets now such guard about his vital blood, and views the passage with such piercing eyes, that none can scape to cheer my pining cheeks, but all is thought too little for her love.
Then from her heart thy looks shall be relieved, and thou shalt joy her as thy soul desires.
How can it be, my sweet friend Jonadab, since Thamar is a virgin, and my sister?
Thus it shall be. Lie down upon thy bed, feigning thee fever sick and ill at ease, and when the king shall come to visit thee, desire thy sister Thamar may be sent to dress some dainties for thy malady. Then, when thou hast her solely with thyself, enforce some favour to thy manly love, see where she comes, entreat her in with thee.
And enter Thamar.
What aileth Ammon with such sickly looks to daunt the favour of his lovely face?
Sweet Thamar's sick, and wish some wholesome cates, dressed with the cunning of thy dainty hands.
That hath the king commanded at my hands. Then come and rest thee, while I make thee ready some dainties, easeful to thy crazed soul.
I go, sweet sister, eased with thy sight.
And they all exit apart from Jonadab.
Why should a prince, whose power may command, obey the rebel passions of his love, when they contend but against his conscience, and may be governed or suppressed by will? Now, Ammon, lose those loving knots of blood that soaked the courage from thy kingly heart, and give it passage to thy withered cheeks. Now, Thamar, ripened are the holy fruits that grew on plants of thy virginity, and rotten is thy name in Israel. Poor Thamar, little did thy lovely hands foretell an action of such violence as to contend with Ammon's lusty arms, sinewed with vigour of his landless love. Fair Thamar now, dishonour hunts thy foot, and follows thee through every covert shade, discovering thy shame and nakedness, even from the valleys of Jehoshaphat, up to the lofty mounts of Lebanon, where Sedders, stirred with anger of the winds, sounding in storms the tale of thy disgrace, tremble with fury, and with murmur shake earth with their feet, and with their heads the heavens, beating the clouds into their swiftest rack, to bear this wonder round about the world.
And he exits, re-enter Ammon, thrusting out Thamar, and also enter Jethray at some point.
Hence from my bed, whose sight offends my soul, as doth the parbreak of disgorged bears.
Unkind, unprincely, and unmanly Ammon, to force and then refuse thy sister's love, adding unto the fright of thy offence the baneful torment of my published shame. Oh, do not this dishonour to thy love, nor clog thy soul with such increasing sin. This second evil far exceeds the first.
Jethray, come thrust this woman from my sight, and bolt the door upon her if she strive.
Go, madam, go. Away, you must be gone. My lord hath done with you. I pray depart.
And he shuts her out.
Whither? Alas, oh, whither shall I fly with folded arms and all amazed soul, cast as was Eva from that glorious soil, where all delight sat baiting winged with thoughts, ready to nestle in her naked breasts, to bare and barren vales with floods made waste, to desert woods and hills with lightning scorched, with death, with shame, with hell, with horror sit. There will I wander from my father's face. There, Absolon, my brother Absolon, sweet Absolon, shall hear his sister mourn. There will I live with my windy sighs, night ravens and owls to rend my bloody side, which with a rusty weapon I will wound, and make them passage to my panting heart. Why talk'st thou, wretch, and leaves the deed undone? Rend hair and garments as thy heart is rent with inward fury of 1,000 griefs, and scatter them by these unhallowed doors to figure Ammon's resting cruelty and tragic spoil of Tamar's chastity.
What causeth Thamar to exclaim so much?
The cause that Thamar shameth to disclose.
Say, I thy brother will revenge that cause.
Ammon, our father's son, hath forced me, and thrust me from him as the scorn of Israel.
Hath Ammon forced thee? By David's hand and by the covenant God hath made with him, Ammon shall bear his violence to hell. Traitor to heaven, traitor to David's throne, traitor to Absalon and Israel. This fact hath Jacob's ruler seen from heaven, and through a cloud of smoke and tower of fire, as he rides vaunting him upon the greens, shall tear his chariot wheels with violent winds, and throw his body in the bloody sea. At him the thunder shall discharge his bolt, and his fair spouse with bright and fiery wings sit ever burning on his hateful bones. Myself, as swift as thunder or his spouse, will hunt occasion with a secret hate to work false Ammon an ungracious end. Go in, my sister, rest thee in my house, and God in time shall take this shame from thee.
Nor God nor time will do that good for me.
And exit Thamar, leaving Absolon behind. Enter David with his train.
My Absolon, what makest thou here alone, and bears such discontentment in thy brows?
Great cause hath Absolon to be displeased, and in his heart to shroud the wounds of wrath.
Against whom should Absolon be thus displeased?
'Gainst wicked Ammon, thy ungracious son, my brother and fair Tamar's by the king, my stepbrother by mother and by kind. He hath dishonored David's holiness and fixed a blot of lightness on his throne, forcing my sister Thamar, when he feigned a sickness sprung from root of heinous lust.
Hath Ammon brought this evil on my house, and suffered sin to smite his father's bones? Smite David deadlier than the voice of heaven, and let hate's fire be kindled in thy heart. Frame in the arches of thy angry brows, making thy forehead like a comet shine, to false Ammon tremble at thy looks. Sin with his sevenfold crown and purple robe begins his triumphs in my guilty throne. There sits he, watching with his 100 eyes our idle minutes and our wanton thoughts, and with his baits made of our frail desires gives us the hook that hales our souls to hell. But with the king spirit of my kingdom's god, I'll thrust the flattering tyrant from his throne, and scourge his bond-slaves from my hallowed court with rods of iron and thorns of sharpened steel. Then, Absolon, revenge not thou his sin. Leave it to me, and I will chasten him.
I am content. Then grant my lord the king himself with all his other lords would come up to my sheep feast on the plain of Hazor.
Nay, my fair son, myself of all my lords will bring thee too much charge, yet some shall go.
But let my lord the king himself take pains. This time of year is pleasant for your grace, and gladsome summer in her shady robes, crowned with roses and with planted flowers, with all her nymphs shall entertain my lord, that from the thicket of my verdant groves will sprinkle honeydews about his breast, and cast sweet balm upon his kingly head. Then grant thy servant's boon, and go, my lord.
Let it content my sweet son Absalom, that I may stay and take my other lords.
But shall thy best beloved Ammon go?
What needeth that Ammon go with thee?
Yet do thy son and servant so much grace.
Ammon shall go, and all my other lords, because I will give grace to Absalom.
Enter Cusay and Urias with others.
Pleaseth my lord the king. His servant Joab hath sent Urias from the Syrian wars.
Welcome, Urias, from the Syrian wars. Welcome to David as his dearest lord.
Thanks be to Israel's God and David's grace. Urias finds such greeting with the king.
No other greeting shall Urias find, as long as David sways the elected seat and consecrated throne of Israel. Tell me, Urias, of my servant Joab, fights he with truth the battles of our God, and for the honour of the Lord's anointed?
Thy servant Joab fights the chosen wars with truth, with honour, and with high success, and against the wicked king of Ammon's sons, hath by the finger of our sovereigns, God, besieged the city Rabbah, and achieved the course of waters, where the conduits run, and all the Ammonites delightful springs. Therefore he wisheth David's mightiness should number out the host of Israel, and come in person to the city Rabbah, that so her conquest may be made the king's, and Joab fight as his inferior.
This hath not God and Joab's prowess done, without Urias' valours, I am sure, who since his true conversion from a Hethite to an adopted son of Israel, hath sought like one whose arms were lift by heaven, and whose bright sword was edged with Israel's wrath. Go therefore home, Urias. Take thy rest. Visit thy wife and household with the joys a victor and a favourite of the kings should exercise with honour after arms.
Our servants' bones are yet not half so crazed, nor constitute on such sickly mould, that for so little service he should feign, and seek, as cowards, refuge of his home. Not are his thoughts so sensually stirred, to stay the arms with which the Lord would smite, and fill their circle with his conquered foes, for wanton bosom of a flattering wife.
Urias has a beauteous sober wife, yet young and framed of tempting flesh and blood. Then, when the king hath summoned thee from arms, if thou kindly shouldst refrain her bed, sin might be laid upon Urias' soul. If Bathsabe by frailty hurt her fame, then go, Urias, solace in her love, whom God hath knit to thee, tremble to lose.
The king is much too tender of my ease. The ark, and Israel, and Judah dwell in palaces, and reap pavilions, but Joab and his brother in the fields, suffering the wrath of the winter and the sun. And shall Urias, of more shame than they, banquet and loiter in the work of heaven? As sure as thy soul doth live, my lord, my ears shall never lean to such delight, when holy labour calls me forth to fight.
Then be it with Urias' manly heart, that best his fame may shine in Israel.
Shall Urias' heart be best content, till thou dismiss me back to Joab's hands, this ground before the king my master's doors.
And he lies down.
Shall be my couch, and this unwearied arm the proper pillow of a soldier's head, for never will I lodge within my house, till Joab triumph in my secret vows.
Then fetch some flagons of our purest wine, that we may welcome home our hardy friend, with full carouses to his fortunes past, and to the honours of his future arms. Then will I send him back to Rabbith's siege, and follow with the strength of Israel.
And enter one with flagons of wine.
Arise, Urias, come and pledge the king.
And indeed he does.
If David think me worthy such a grace, I will be bold and pledge my lord the king.
Absolon and Cusay both shall drink to good Urias and his happiness.
We will, my lord, to please Urias' soul.
I will begin. Urias, to thyself, and all the treasures of the Ammonites, which here I promise to impart to thee, and bind that promise with a full carouse.
What seemeth pleasant in my sovereign's eyes, that shall Urias do till he be dead.
Fill him the cup. Follow ye yours that love your sovereign's health, and do as he hath done.
Ill may he thrive or live in Israel, that loves not David nor denies his charge. Urias, here is to Abyssai's health, Lord Joab's brother and thy loving friend.
I pledge Lord Absolon and Abyssus' health.
And he drinks.
Here now, Urias, to the health of Joab, and to the pleasant journey we shall have when we return to mighty Rabbith's siege.
Cusay, I pledge thee all, with all my heart. Give me some drink, ye servants of the king. Give me my drink.
And he drinks.
Well done, my good Urias. Drink thy fill, that in thy fullness David may rejoice.
I will, my lord.
Now, Lord Urias, one carouse to me.
No, sir, I'll drink to the king. Your father is a better man than you.
Do so, Urias. I will pledge thee straight.
I will indeed, my lord and sovereign. I once in my days be so bold.
Fill him his glass.
Fill me my glass.
And gives him the glass.
Quickly, I say.
Quickly, I say. Here, my lord, by your favour now I drink to you.
I pledge thee, good Urias, presently.
And he drinks.
Here then, Urias, once again for me, and to the health of David's children.
David's children?
Aye, David's children. Wilt thou pledge me, man?
Pledge me, man?
Pledge me, I say, or else thou lovest us not.
What do you talk? Do you talk? I'll no more. I'll lie down here.
Rather, Urias, go thou home and sleep.
Oh, no, sir. Would you make me break my sentence?
And he lies down.
Home, sir? No, indeed, sir. I'll sleep upon my lawn, like a soldier, sleep like a man, as long as I live in Israel.
If naught will serve to save his wife's renown, I'll send him with a letter unto Joab to put him in the forefront of the wars, that so my purposes may take effect. Help him in, sirs.
And exit David and Absolon.
Come, rise, Urias, get thee in and sleep.
I will not go home, sir. That's flat.
Then come, and rest thee upon David's bed.
On a fall, my lords, on a fall.
And they exit, and we'll pause there. It was a massive scene, but it's a scene made of interlocking scenes, and I kind of wanted to let that flow because if we thought the opening was a bit problematic, by God, does the themes of the play continue and get even more so as we go. Various themes obviously emerging here. It's the enabling of servants I'm finding very interesting, of the way they're complicit in so many actions here. The way that there's that weird moment when Absolon, having spoken to David about, revenge and things, and David seems much more interested about his own personal dishonor rather than what happened to anybody else. And then Absolon sort of changes the subject because he seems to be thinking ahead to be doing something else. There's so much going on here, and the sort of interconnections between families. I think I saw in chat someone talking about a family tree would be helpful. But it is that sense that this scene is drawing together the way characters are interlocked and how they're interacting with each other. So, yes, thoughts? Who wants to leap in? Alan.
Yeah, it was me who asked the question about the family tree, because we got the point where it seems that David's forces are fighting Ammon's, and yet it then appears that Ammon is a sibling, maybe step-sibling, of Absolon, and therefore a son of David.
Yeah, the thing is that David has quite a few sons. There's a lot of them by different people. So it is genuinely confusing.
I don't know the answer to this one, but I assume that the Ammon that he's fighting is a different Ammon.
Yeah, that would have been how I would have taken it too. The Ammonites are all the way over there in Syria, which means different things at different times in history. And then there's another Ammon. Maybe he's called Ammon because of a victory in the other place or something. I think there's two Ammons.
Yeah.
I mean, I forget how many wives David had, but it was an extraordinarily... he was overambitious in that field.
In the old phrase, his own and other people's.
Well, yes, we're getting all sorts of strange plotting going on. I mean, we should probably go back to the beginning of the scene with Jonadab, with what's going on with Thamar and Ammon and what's going on there, because that's a really problematic scene to unpack.
Yeah, this is the bit that should have had the trigger warning, and it should have specifically been a trigger warning for rape.
Incestuous rape at that.
Yes.
And afterwards, of course, the shame is laid on Thamar.
Yeah. And that's
who
the thing with
rejected for having been raped by the man who raped her.
Yeah.
Is not uncommon, right? Put her radical feminist hat on. That is how it's worked.
And it is the fact that when David is informed of what, to a degree of what's going on, it's all about his honor. There's no mention of actually what really, he doesn't seem to be particularly interested in that.
No, he's all about the glory, isn't he, David? And not just that, he's trying to portray himself as this fair but tough leader. And, even in that scene when he's talking with Urias, I mean, all the while, he's trying to persuade him, go home to your wife, I mean, it's he's trying to keep things flowing as much as possible, but at the same time, there also seems to be an agenda going on with him, or maybe I'm reading too much into it at the moment, but he seems very keen to get Urias away for certain, and he's trying to slant it. It's like you have you try and make up a plausible excuse if you want somebody to get out of your house sooner than you wanted them, because you find that they're annoying or something like that. But it's like an unwanted visitor. But at the same time, it also feels, as I was reading it, it felt very, very methodical, the way that he was doing it. It's like with Bathsabe earlier on. He's very methodical in getting to her, and it's like he's methodical in in war, but how long that will last, I don't know.
Lynsey.
Yeah, I was really struck by David's speech in the scene with Absolon when he says, "Sin with his sevenfold crown and purple robe begins his triumphs in my guilty throne." And I was thinking, is that a real sentiment? Is that, is he being the arch hypocrite and sort of saying, "Oh my God, there's so much sin around me and I'm responsible because I'm the king, but it's actually not my sin," I was really struck by that. And then also really struck by the let's get everybody drunk, manner in which the scene ultimately ends. As you say, it's a very long scene.
Yes, it sort of moves in 3 different movements, and the scenes are sort of careering into each other. And then when Urias first enters, and is that sort of opening gambit? Is that pre-scripted? Is that where is David's public and private face in this? Throughout this, and what's he doing with Urias? And when he's talking about go home to your wife, where is that real? What's going on there? And then he gets him drunk. Is he deliberately trying to pretend to be more virtuous than he is? He's not coming across well.
Hence the methodical approach in order to keep everybody happy in a way, but at the same time, I think it's from some of the language he uses and from the weirdness of the situation in which he's trying to loosen people up, but yet get rid of them quickly because they may be coming too close. It's almost like at that point, the 2 faces are almost starting to merge, and he doesn't like it. So he has to literally move it quick along. It's like he's let people too close, I think, at that point. But at the same time, where does the line blur? It's almost like it's deliberate, but also not deliberate at the same time. It's weird.
I was kind of waiting for him to kill Urias when he said he wouldn't go home. Like with all the drink, I was like, he's poisoned him and he's going to die. And then when he didn't die, I was like, oh.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, we've all been in the poison plot before, haven't we?
Yeah.
And we were all waiting for him to die.
Yeah.
Every time I lay down, Game of Thrones, clearly.
Yeah, sorry, Georgia, say again?
No, it's just every time he lay down, I thought it was going to be the poison taking effect.
Yeah.
Never was. And
I did.
With David's comment about the sin around his throne, I wondered, does he actually see the parallel between his treatment of Bathsabe and the assault of Tamar? Or does it just completely, he doesn't recognize because he's a king invested with the holy power, so he doesn't see his behavior as the same? Because to me, there's a completely obvious parallel in behavior, but
yeah.
Yeah, Liza.
Okay, so in the Bible, roughly, the reason he's called Uriah home is that at this point, at least in the biblical story, if not in the play, David has already had sex with Bathsabe, and he's called Uriah home, hoping that they will shag, and that if he's made Bathsabe pregnant, then the child will be passed off as Uriah's. And when that doesn't work, he's going to send him back to war and put him in the forefront of the battle and hope he gets killed. Spoilers.
Yeah, I mean, there is that sense of how much is the audience already expected to know the background to this story, to be layered onto this, elements of this which may be reinterpreted or not. Tamara?
I was just going to say for the... actually, I don't know if this will be spoilers. Ignore me.
Okay, one last Alan I saw a while ago.
I was going to make the same point that Liza's just made.
Oh, excellent. We do need to move forward, so if you've got anything else from that scene, just hold on to it and we'll try and filter it in at the end. We have, however, the intercession of the chorus. So I don't know if the chorus is the same as the prologue. Might be someone completely different. But if we can have the chorus, please.
O proud revolt of a presumptuous man, laying his bridle in the neck of sin, ready to bear him past his grave to hell, like as the fatal raven that in his voice carries the dreadful summons of our deaths, flies by the fair Arabian spiceries, her pleasant gardens and delightsome parks, seeming to curse them with his hoarse exclaims, and yet doth stoop with hungry violence upon a piece of hateful carrion, so wretched man, displeased with those delights would yield a quickening savour to his soul, pursues with eager and unstaunched thirst the greedy longings of his loathsome flesh. If holy David so shook hands with sin, what shall our baser spirits glory in? This king, by giving lust her reign, pursues the sequel with a greater ill. Urias, in the forefront of the wars, is murthered by the hateful heathen sword, and David joys his too dear Bathsabe. Suppose this past, and that the child is born, whose death the prophet solemnly doth mourn.
So yes, anyone who mentioned spoilers just now, if we're past that spoiler mark, feel free to make your comment now, Tamara, unless it's a different spoiler you're thinking of.
It was a different spoiler.
Okay, other spoilers are available. It's fair to say the chorus, if we can say the chorus is an authorial mouthpiece, is pushing us in a moral direction now, which we haven't necessarily felt the play is necessarily, in terms of intent, has quite been laying down yet. So we may feel reassured by this chorus. Do we? Just Helen.
May I make sorry, I'm not answering your question. May I make a plea for recognition of Peele's poetry? He really, really is something else. I mean, just look at pursues with eager and unstaunched thirst the greedy longings of his loathsome flesh. I mean, I've never come across a better description of a predator, a sexual predator.
I didn't want to really linger here. So, are there any additional thoughts, Francis?
Yeah, one thing that just really struck me was that Lust is female in this. This king, by giving Lust her reign, I just found that really striking. That Lust is, is female, which I found a little disturbing.
Tamara, I see lots of hands actually, but Tamara first.
Well, Lust being female is pretty much a very Christian, biblical, whatever you want to call it, thing, because Eve is the temptress, and then you've got her shadow Lilith, who isn't mentioned in the Bible, but she does come up, and again she's a demon, and almost, there is so much that Lust is always blamed on the women. That's where the whole rape culture we've got now is coming from. I'm not going to continue with this. Sorry.
Yes, Aliki.
Just very quickly, I mean, Aphrodite, Venus is Lust, so it doesn't have to be biblical.
And Stephen.
In early modern terms, masculinity is linked to self-control, and so lust is unmanly. So it's one of those nice little binaries. You're not a proper man if you don't control your lust. Therefore, the lusty ones are, circular thing.
Okay, we will return. Time has passed. The functionality of the chorus is primarily to say some years have occurred. And so they have. And so enter Bathsabe with her handmaiden.
Mourn, Bathsabe, bewail thy foolishness, thy sin, thy shame, the sorrow of thy soul. Sin, shame, and sorrow swarm about thy soul. And in the gates and entrance of my heart, sadness with wreathed arms hangs her complaint. No comfort from the 10-stringed instrument, the twinkling cymbal or the ivory lute, nor doth the sound of David's kingly harp make glad the broken heart of Bathsabe. Jerusalem is filled with thy complaint, and in the streets of Sion fits thy grief. The babe in sick to the death I fear. The fruit that sprung from thee to David's house, nor may the pot of honey and of oil glad David or his handmaid's countenance. Urias, woe is me to think hereon, for who is it among the sons of men that saith not to my soul, the king hath sinned, David hath done amiss, and Bathsabe laid snares of death unto Urias' life. My sweet Urias, fallen into the pit art thou, and gone even to the gates of hell for Bathsabe, that wouldst not shroud her shame. What is it to serve the lust of kings? How lion-like thy rage when we resist. But Bathsabe in humbleness attend, the grace that God will to his handmaid send.
And she exits. David in his gown, walking sadly, and there may be servants attending at this moment.
The babe is sick, and sad is David's heart to see the guiltless bear the guilty's pain. David, hang up thy harp, hang down thy head, and dash that ivory lute against the stones. The dew that on the hill of Hanon falls rains not on Sion's tops and lofty towers, and David's thoughts are spent in pensiveness. The plains of Gath and Ascalon rejoice. Babe is sick, sweet babe, that Bathsabe with woman's pain brought forth to Israel.
And enter Nathan.
But what saith Nathan to his lord the king?
Thus Nathan saith unto his lord the king, there were two men, both dwellers in one town. The one was mighty and exceeding rich in oxen, sheep, and cattle of the field, the other poor, having nor ox, nor calf, nor other cattle, save one little lamb which he had brought and nourished by the hand. And it grew up and fed with him and his, and eat and drank as he and his were wont, and in his bosom slept, and was to live as was his daughter or his dearest child. There came a stranger to this wealthy man, and he refused and spared to take his own or of his store to dress or make him meat, but took the poor man's sheep, the poor man's store, and dressed it for this stranger in his house. What, tell me, shall be done to him for this?
Now as the Lord doth live, this wicked man is judged, and shall become the child of death. Fourfold to the poor man shall he restore, that without mercy took his lamb away.
Thou art the man, and thou hast judged thyself. David, thus saith the Lord thy God by me, I, the anointed king in Israel, and saved thee from the tyranny of Saul. Thy master's house I gave thee to possess. His wives into thy bosom did I give, and Judah and Jerusalem withal. And might, thou knowest, if this had been too small, have given thee more. Wherefore hast thou then gone so far astray, and hast done evil, and sinned in my sight? Urias thou hast killed with the sword, yea, with the sword of the uncircumcised thou hast him slain. Wherefore from this day forth the sword shall never go from thee and thine. For thou hast ta'en this Heshite's wife to thee. Wherefore, behold, I will, saith Jacob's God, in thine own house stir evil up to thee. Yea, I before thy face will take thy wives and give them to thy neighbor to possess. This shall be done to David in the day that Israel openly may see thy shame.
Nathan, I have against the Lord, I have sinned. Oh, sinned grievously. And lo, from heaven's throne doth David throw himself, and groan and grovel to the gates of hell.
And he falls down to the ground.
David, stand up. Thus saith the Lord by me, David the king shall live. For he hath seen the true repentant sorrow of thy heart, But for thou hast in this misdeed of thine stirred up the enemies of Israel to triumph and blaspheme the God of hosts, and say, he set a wicked man to reign over his loved people and his tribes. The child shall surely die that erst was born, his mother's sin, its kingly father's scorn.
And exit the prophet Nathan.
How just is Jacob's God in all his works! Must it die that David loveth so? Oh, that the mighty one of Israel nill change his doom, and says the babe must die. Mourn Israel and weep in Sion gates. Wither ye cedar trees of Lebanon, ye sprouting almonds with your flowering tops, droop down and drench in Hebron's fearful streams. This babe must die that was to David born, his mother's sin, his kingly father's scorn.
And David sits sadly. Enter Cusay to David and his train.
What tidings bringeth Cusay to the king?
To thee, the servant of King David's court, this bringeth Cusay, as the prophet spake. The Lord hath surely stricken to the death the child newborn by that Urias wife, that by the sons of Ammon erst was slain.
Cusay, be still, the king is vexed sore. How shall he speed that brings this tidings first, when while the child was yet alive we spake, and David's heart would not be comforted?
Yea, David's heart will not be comforted. What murmur ye, the servants of the king? What tidings telleth Cusay to the king? Say, Cusay, lives the child, or is he dead?
The child is dead, that of Urias' wife David begat.
Urias' wife, sayest thou? Child is dead, and seeketh David shame. Fetch me to eat, and give me my wine to drink, water to wash and oil to clean my looks. Bring down your shawms, your cymbals, and your pipes. Let David's harp and lute, his hand and voice, give laud to him that loveth Israel, and sing his praise that shendered David's fame, that put away his sin from out his sight, and sent his shame into the streets of Gath. Bring ye to me the mother of the babe, that I may wipe the tears from off her face, and give her comfort with this hand of mine. And deck fair Bathsabe with ornaments, that she may bear to me another son, that may be loved of the Lord of hosts. For where he is, of course must David go, but never may he come where David is.
They bring in water, wine, and oil. There's music and a banquet, and enter Bathsabe.
Fair Bathsabe, sit thou, and sigh no more, and sing and play, you servants of the king. Now sleepeth David's sorrow with the dead, and Bathsabe live to Israel.
And they use all solemnities together and sing, etc.
Now arms and warlike engines for assault. Prepare at once, ye men of Israel, ye men of Judah and Jerusalem, that Rabbah may be taken by the king, lest it be called after Joab's name, nor David's glory shine in Sion's streets. To Rabbah marcheth David with his men, to chastise Ammon and the wicked ones.
And they exit, and yes. David's sad.
Not as sad as he should be.
No, he's not.
No.
I mean, we've had the chorus pushing one thing. We then get Bathsabe doing that really quite wrenching speech. And then David gets trapped by a prophet. You know, it's quite a traditional trap, really. And I'm just sitting there going, "It's a trap," and you can see it coming. That happens everywhere, and but yeah, there's something quite unpleasant about the way all of this works, and it's and the way that, you know, politics thing sort of comes back in again. Oh, the child's dead. Oh, well, that's that done with. So let's move on.
He sees the death of the child as a sign that God has forgiven him.
I mean, it's really messed up. It really is genuinely messed up.
He's a widow now, so that's okay, right? There's no evidence of his crime.
And so they bring Bathsabe in, and she says nothing.
What's she gonna say, poor woman?
But I mean, that silence does speak volumes, really, at this stage.
And what's interesting, reading that again, everything David does is extremely political again. You know, it's you know, he's obviously cut up by the child, but as you know, everybody's mentioned, it's not as devastating as it's made out to be. And what's interesting about it is that he, you know, even throughout the whole text, in states like the ones he's in at the moment, where it's life-changing decisions, he refers to himself in the third person. And it's, I tell you, that for me is very, very significant. And the fact that's really shocking as well, it can be really shocking, is the fact that he just sees it as another opportunity to, you know, to say, oh yeah, well, that's done with that, I'll have another child by her. It's like, bang, one direction into another, and it's fast. Whether it's cruel or him denying everything that he's feeling is another matter. But the fact that he moves so quickly and talks about himself in the third person for another life-changing opportunity to make his mark, that's quite significant. It's scary.
Yeah, we're halfway through the play, and I have to say, I don't know who the hell David is. You know, I know I know what he does, and you know, many things, but who is he? What's going on? I find it's just so horrific. Aliki.
Just very briefly, following on what Sascha said, he refers to himself a couple of times as Israel. I am the nation. But Nathan makes very clear, you were given reign over Israel, God's people. You, never mind what.
Yeah. Yes, it was nice to have him being castigated. It was rather cathartic, I found.
Oh, it was cathartic, thank you.
The last play we did that had so much biblical narrative, I think, was Looking Glass for London, England. And I really like the way this has been adapted from the biblical story. Because I was thinking, how are they going to do it? You know, how are they going to bring it to life? And I really like the way, I think David is actually quite intelligently drawn. That he's the king, but he is flawed. He is the king, and he does rule over Israel, but he's flawed, and he tries to cover up what he's done, and it makes it worse.
I mean, yeah, they're two very interesting plays in contrast, actually. You know, because you know they both have these elements that are really, really dark and difficult to deal with, and that's yeah, there's so much here. Any additional thoughts before we go into our final tranche before we end the session? We've got a couple of little scenes to go. Lynsey.
I mean, it doesn't. It sort of doesn't need to be said, but obviously now that Urias is dead, David can have as many sin-free children with Bathsabe as he wants. So.
Yeah, and yeah. Anything else before we move on? Jitka.
It's peculiar that so many characters refer to themselves in the third person. Bathsabe does it all the time, even from the very beginning of the play. And the opening of her soliloquy, monologue, very, very painful in that internalized shame. It also creates the fact that she speaks of herself as the another person. Yeah, it really amplifies that internalized shame, because she is her own accuser when she says, thy sin, thy shame. The sorrow, obviously the play with fricatives is incredible there. But yeah, it seems to, with David, it creates that politicized distance. With her, it seems to amplify the trauma.
Yeah. Okay. We will move forward. So we're going to have a shortish scene here, which will run into the next scene. So enter Absolon with 2 or 3.
Set up your mules and give them well to eat, and let us meet our brothers at the feast. Accursed is the master of this feast, dishonor of the house of Israel, his sister's slander and his mother's shame. Shame be his share that could such ill contrive to ravish Thamar, and without a pause to drive her shamefully from out his house. But may his wickedness find just reward. Therefore doth Absolon conspire with you, that Ammon die what time he sits to eat. For in the holy temple have I sworn wreak of his villainy in Tamar's rape. And here he comes. Bespeak him gently all, whose death is deeply graved in my heart.
So enter Ammon with Adonia and Jonadab to Absolon and his company.
Shearers are not far from hence, I wot. Ammon, to you all his brethren giveth such welcome as our fathers erst were wont in Judah and Jerusalem. But especially Lord Absolon, to thee, the honour of thy house and progeny. Sit down and dine with me, King David's son. Thou fair young men, whose hairs shine in mine eye, like golden wires of David's ivory lute.
Ammon, where be thy shearers and thy men, that we may pour in plenty of thy vines and eat thy goat's milk and rejoice with thee?
Here cometh Ammon's shearers and his men. Absalom, sit and rejoice with me.
And here enters a company of shepherds, and they dance and sing.
Drink, Absalom, in praise of Israel. Welcome to Ammon's fields from David's court.
Die with thy draught, perish and die accursed. Dishonor to the honor of us all. Die for the villainy to Thamar done. Unworthy thou to be King David's son.
And so, in theory, probably stabbing him at that point, exit Absolon.
Oh, what hath Absalom for Thamar done? Murthered his brother, great King David's son.
Oh, I don't think I've given out an Adonia.
Shall I just read it?
Have I? Have I not? Who's Adonia?
Yes, you have. It's me, only I was muted.
Ah.
Sorry. Run, I'm having a bad day. Run, Jonadab, away, and make it known what cruelty this Absolon hath shown. Ammon, thy brother Adonia, shall bury thy body among the dead men's bones, and we will make complaint to Israel of Ammon's death and pride of Absolon.
Okay, I wasn't going to pause there, but I think we should. So we have this. We knew this was set up earlier, even though they never explained earlier what this whole sheep shearing thing was about. But I think anyone clued in would know it's another trap. But it is that thing that we know what's coming, and yet we still have a song and dance spectacular by the shepherds. And I'm really interested in how tonally that functions. I'd love to know what they were singing, how that works with the murder that's about to happen there, and how that all goes. I find that fascinating. Any thoughts for that little scenette?
Well,
Alan first.
I must admit, I know you said stabbed. I've a feeling the fact that he's calling for the wine, in fact, what he's done is dropped a poison in the wine. Which is much easier to conceal.
It's interesting. Again, I'm taking that from the edition where we were talking about stage direction issues earlier. So it inferred a stabbing. It's no idea how he was actually murdered. So poisoning is perfectly plausible. Francis.
Yeah, one thing that struck me was that we had the chorus saying that quite some time has passed. Bathsabe's, had enough time to get pregnant, and in fact, she's given birth to a son. And then suddenly we have this murder scene with Absolon and Ammon. And I thought, well, they've taken their time to get around to this.
Yes, because this was set up before then, wasn't it? Because he said, we're going to do the sheep shearing thing later. Are you up for that?
So it's this odd thing, this sort of odd time thing, which we seem to get in these early modern plays.
They're hoping if the play moves quickly enough, no one notices until they're on their horse going home. That's the thing, is as long as you don't notice until you're on the way home, and you go, oh, hang on. Okay, any final thoughts before we go into final scene for the session? Tamara.
I just love the fact that Jonadab or whatever we pronounce that character, I just love that he's gone from, so this is how you do it, and this is how you get in her bed, to, oh my god, you killed your brother. What?
Well, this is literally a case of bros before hoes, right? The implication is that Thamar wasn't worth Absolon becoming a fratricide over, that he should have valued loyalty to his brother. Renaissance gonna Renaissance.
But it's fascinating as a modern audience, I find. It's really... So far, the whole play is really interesting in that I think if you were to stage it, it would be really interesting.
Yes, there's so much to navigate here. This is and how you decide what the tone of the production is, as opposed to what the text is also doing. I mean, there are so many practical problems. Anyway, we're going to go into what is essentially a sequence of events again, but I'm going to rattle on until our assigned end point and see how it goes. So here, enter David with Joab, Abyssus, is it Abyssus? Maybe it's something else. Cusay and others. There's Drum, an ensign, and they're going against Rabbah. And that should be David speaking first.
Okay, because it's not mentioned. Okay.
No, it should be David.
Okay, thank you. This is the town of the uncircumcised, the city of the kingdom. This is it, Rabbah, where wicked Hanon sitteth king. Despoil this king, this Hanon of this crown. Unpeople Rabbah and the streets thereof, for in their blood and slaughter of the slain lieth the honour of King David's line. Joab, Abishai, and the rest of you, fight ye this day for great Jerusalem.
Joab?
Oh,
where's my Joab?
In my text, it doesn't have my name. It just carries on from David.
Oh, I apologise. I got Joab in mine.
Oh, I might have accidentally got rid of it. Sorry. Anyway. And see where Hanon shows him on the walls, why then do we forbear to give assault, that Israel may, as it is promised, subdue the daughters of the Gentiles' tribes. All this must be performed by David's hand.
Hark to me, Hanon, and remember well, as sure as he doth live that kept my host, what time our young men by the pool of Gibeon went forth against the strength of Isbosheth, and 12 to 12 did with their weapons play. So sure art thou, and thy men of war, to feel the sword of Israel this day, because thou hast defied Jacob's God, and suffered Rabbah with the Philistine to rail upon the tribe of Benjamin.
Hark, man, as sure as Saul thy master fell, and gored his sides upon the mountain tops, and Jonathan, Abinadab, and Melchishua watered the dales and deeps of Ascaron with bloody streams that from Gilboa ran in channels through the wilderness of Ziph. What time the sword of the uncircumcised was drunken with the blood of Israel, so sure shall David perish with his men under the walls of Rabbah, Hanon's town.
Hanon, the God of Israel, hath said, David the king shall wear that crown of thine, that weighs a talent of the finest gold, and triumph in the spoil of Hanon's town, when Israel shall hale thy people hence, and turn them to the tilekin, man and child, and put them under harrows made of iron, and hew their bones with axes, and their limbs with iron swords divide and tear in twain. Hanon, this shall be done to thee and thine, because thou hast defied Israel. To arms that Rabbah feel revenge, and Hanon's town become King David's spoil.
And there's a Laram excursions assault, because they're all very, very cross about, I don't know, is it circumcision? I haven't decided what they're precisely angry about. And they exit, and then the trumpets, and David enters with Hanon's crown.
Now clattering arms and wrathful storms of war have thundered over Rabbah's raced towers, the wreakful ire of great Jehovah's arm, that for his people made the gates to rend, and clothed the cherubims in fiery coats, to fight against the wicked Hanon's town. Pay thanks, ye men of Judah, to the King, the God of Sion and Jerusalem, that hath exalted Israel to this, and crowned David with his diadem.
Beauteous and bright is he among the tribes, as when the sun, attired in glistering robe, comes dancing from his oriental gate, and bridegroom-like hurls through the gloomy air his radiant beams. Such doth King David show, crowned with the honour of his enemy's town, shining in riches like the firmament, the starry vault that overhangs the earth. So looketh David, King of Israel.
Joab, why doth not David mount his throne, whom heaven hath beautified with Hanon's crown? Sound trumpets, shawms, and instruments of praise to Jacob's God for David's victory.
And passably with some trumpets going off, enter Jonadab.
Why doth the king of Israel rejoice? Why sitteth David crowned with rabbis of rule? Behold, there hath great heaviness befallen in Ammon's fields by Absalon's misdeeds, and Ammon's shearers and their feast of mirth Absalon hath overturned with his sword. Nor liveth any of King David's sons to bring this bitter tidings to the king.
Ay me, how soon are David's triumphs dashed. How suddenly declineth David's pride. As doth the daylight settle in the west, so dim is David's glory, and his gait. Die, David, for to thee is left no seed, that they revive thy name in Israel.
In Israel is left of David's seed.
And enter Adonia with other sons.
Comfort your lord, you servants of the king. Behold thy sons return in mourning weeds, and only Ammon Absolon hath slain.
Welcome, my sons. Dearer to me you are than is his golden crown, or Hanon's spoil. Oh, tell me then, tell me, my sons, I say, how cometh it to pass that Absolon hath slain his brother Ammon with the sword?
Thy sons, O king, went up to Ammon's fields to feast with him and eat his bread and oil. And Absolon upon his mule doth come. And to his men he said, when Ammon's heart is merry and secure, then strike him dead, because he forced Thamar shamefully, and hated her, and threw her forth his doors. And this did he, and they with him conspire, to kill thy son in wreck of Tamar's wrong.
How long shall Judah and Jerusalem complain and water Sion with their tears? How long shall Israel lament in vain, and not a man among the mighty ones will hear the sorrows of King David's heart? Ammon, thy life was pleasing to thy Lord, as to mine ears the music of my lute, or songs that David tuneth to his harp. And Absalom hath ta'en away from me the gladness of my sad, distressed soul.
And they all exit. We go into one final scene before we close the session, go into extra time. Enter the widow of Thoshia. Thecure. I don't know.
Don't know.
Thekoa?
Tekoa. Let's go with that.
God save King David, King of Israel, and bless the gates of Sion for his sake.
Woman, why mournest thou? Rise from the earth. Tell me what sorrow hath befallen thy soul.
Thy servant's soul, O King, is troubled sore, and grievous is the anguish of her heart, and from Tekoa doth thy handmaid come.
Tell me, and say thou, woman of Tekoa, what aileth thee, or what is come to pass?
Thy servant is a widow in Tekoa. 2 sons thy handmaid had, and they, my lord, fought in the field, where no man went betwixt, and so the one did smite and slay the other. And lo, behold, a kindred doth arise, and call on him that smote his brother, that he therefore may be the child of death, for we will fall and destroy the air. So will they quench that sparkle that's left, and leave no name nor issue in the earth, to me or to my handmaid's husband dead.
Woman, return. Go home unto thy house. I will take order that thy son be safe. If any man say otherwise, then well, bring him to me, and I shall chastise him. For as the Lord doth live, shall not a hair shed from thy son, or fall upon the earth. Woman, to God alone belongs revenge. Shall then the kindred slay him for his sin?
Well hath King David to his handmaid spoke, but wherefore then hast thou determined so hard a part against the righteous tribes, to follow and pursue the banished, when as to God alone belongs revenge? Assuredly thou sayest against thyself, therefore call home again the banished. Call home the banished, that he may live, and raise to thee some fruit in Israel.
Thou woman of Tekoa, answer me. Answer me one thing I shall ask of thee. Is not the hand of Joab in this work? Tell me, is not his finger in this fact?
It is, my lord. His hand is in this work. Assuredly, Joab, captain of thy host, hath put these words into thy handmaid's mouth, and thou art as an angel from on high, to understand the meaning of my heart. Lo, where he cometh to his lord the king.
And enter Joab.
Say, Joab, didst thou send this woman in to put this parable for Absolon?
Joab, my lord, did bid this woman speak, and she hath said, and thou hast understood.
I have, and am content to do the thing. Go fetch my son, so that he may live with me.
Joab kneels.
Now God be blessed for King David's life. Thy servant Joab hath found grace with thee, in that thou sparest Absolon thy child. A beautiful and fair young man is he. In all his body is no blemish seen. His hair is like the wire of David's harp that twines about his bright and ivory neck. In Israel is not such a goodly man, and here I bring him to entreat for grace.
Enter Absalom with Joab.
Hast thou slain in the fields of Hasor our Absalom, my son? Ah, my son, Absalom. But wherefore do I vex thy spirit so? Live and return from Gesur to thy house. Return from Gesur to Jerusalem. What boots it to be bitter to thy soul? Ammon is dead, and Absalom survives.
Father, I have offended Israel. I have offended David and his house. For Tamar's wrong hath Absalom misdone. But David's heart is free from sharp revenge, and Joab hath got grace for Absalom.
Depart with me, you men of Israel, you that have followed Rabbah with the sword, and ransack Ammon's richest treasuries. Live, Absalom, my son, live once in peace. Peace with thee, and with Jerusalem.
And they all exit apart from Absalom.
David is gone, and Absalom remains, flowering in pleasant springtime of his youth. Why liveth Absalom, and is not honored of tribes and elders, and the mightiest ones, that round about his temples he may wear garlands and wreaths set on with reverence, that every one that hath a cause to plead might come to Absalom and call for right? Then in the gates of Sion would I sit, and publish laws in great Jerusalem. And not a man should live in all the land, but Absolon would do him reasons due. Therefore shall I address me as I may, to love the men and tribes of Israel.
And there we close this session, a little over halfway through. I'm definitely feeling in this scene the mechanics of the biblical narrative almost slightly getting in the way. He's forgiven. It's like we had the prophet earlier, and now we have the woman coming in and delivering this parable that again he sort of has to follow the logic of, this, things are happening sort of without. There's a sort of. They're happening because it has to happen, not because there's the best of dramatic reasons, perhaps. Saying, I do like David's line. Is not the hand of Joab in this work? Tell me, is not his finger in this fact? I like that line. I like a bit of alliteration.
Me too. That was fun.
So yeah, it's it's a bit of what it's weird. It's sort of this relief that we have a battle scene because it's like it's almost that's nicer, even though lots of people are going to presumably die horribly. Jonadab's entrance explaining that his son's dead seems weirdly incomplete. I almost didn't actually hear what the lines don't sort of convey that information very clearly. And then he goes, "Oh, dead," and then it's a weirdly truncated little scene. Thoughts? Liza.
Yeah, so far, I mean, way back in that earlier scene, Jonadab basically arranged the rape of Thamar, and I'm not seeing him facing consequences for that. Absolon, it's made pretty clear that his sin is now ambition. And I don't know, possibly a touch of vanity because of his great hair. But
nobody's mentioned the hair yet, yes.
But if you have great hair, why shouldn't you render thanks unto the creator of that hair? It's interesting that Absalom's speech lays emphasis on moral judgment, which we've now pretty clearly seen that David is more or less devoid of.
Other thoughts? We're into extra time, so you can expand beyond just this scene into the play overall. How are we feeling? As it were. Let's start with Helen first.
Yeah, I did the editing for the text, for which I apologize. I came out of it pretty traumatized, I can tell you. But I don't have to go into that. But one of the things that was given to me specifically in my brief was not to go back to the Bible and normalize the names, which is why they're all over the shop. And I'm beginning to think this may have been an error and that we would actually have been better if I'd fixed the name problem.
Oh, I think definitely for production we would, because there is, I think there is a distinction between Ammon, the other person far away, and Amnon, who is the figure who is in the play. So there is a spelling differentiation that can be added there that would make that clearer. Also,
Bathsabe is all over the place, the spellings of her name.
Yes, I quite liked the Bathsabe. I quite like that. It was, I don't know whether everybody corrected it, but nobody said it the way it was spelt. I was almost disappointed. But no, it's probably better not to have done it. Everyone would have got confused at home. Alan. Aliki first. Sorry.
I just wanted following up from what Liza said about the king's moral judgment, which we know is terrible, and that is constantly referred to. That, well, you don't have much choice. He's the king, and that's a constant in the play so far. Everybody keeps going, "Yay, the king is great," while he does all of these horrible things that everybody knows are horrible things.
Yes. Sorry, Alan.
Yeah, I've just had a quick skim back to the beginning, and I think this may be an artifact of the original printing, but where it's referring to the adversary, it would make far more sense if that was Hanon rather than Ammon. Because certainly with the latter bit that we've just dealt with, it's Hanon who is the adversary. And that's why I was getting totally confused by who the heck was who. Because I didn't think this was a family argument.
No, I mean there is an element that the foreign war is basically a MacGuffin. It really doesn't matter to the plot so far. I mean, there might be something more coming later on, and even if that isn't correct, it might be a change that you'd make to just simplify everything.
Yeah, but I mean, basically, it's from. I'm just looking at it. Page 5, I think it is. 4 or 5, thereabouts. When they start talking about the war, I think that should be Hanon rather than Ammon.
No, Hanon is Ammon's son. There are two distinctive people. There are 3. There are 2 Ammons, one of whom is related to David and one of whom isn't. And there's a Hanon who is the son of Ammon.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it's irritatingly slightly more complicated. But again, I have no particular reason. If we want to slightly simplify the politics, I'm quite content to do that.
I think we could play with the name there and make that a little clearer.
Yeah.
Or a little less unclear.
Yeah. Other thoughts sort of going around the room now because we're into extra time. We've lost a few people. We knew they were leaving early, so that's fine. They're not running away in terror. They might be, I don't know. Francis, do you have any final thoughts?
Not really, just say there's a lot going on, so it's difficult to keep track of it all, and I can't say at this point where I think the play's going.
It doesn't seem to be too interested in having an integrated plot. It feels like things are just happening.
Yeah.
And that it's thematic. These constant relations of David and women. I mean, even though when he's talking to the widow it's just, again, it's this another relationship he's having with a woman that, or who other people are having with women, and the male-female dynamic and just the horror of it all seems to be the general theme rather than working towards this is the plot heading for a very clear moral conclusion, because I don't quite feel we're there yet. It's kind of play where I'm thinking, do we want an interval? Because would we get anyone back? I don't know. I can't quite remember. I remember details of what's coming up in the second half, but I can't actually remember precisely where it's going. Jitka, any final thoughts from you? You're muted at the moment.
Well, it's a very uncomfortable masculine play with very masculine themes, and the women basically don't really matter unless to cause trouble by being too beautiful or just ended up being pregnant.
Georgia, final thoughts?
Yeah, very interesting to see like such a intensely patriarchal biblical narrative, and also how strangely, because there was beautiful poetry and beautiful spoken poetry from Peele, but then there were simultaneously moments where a character it would be like, come over here, oh, you're suddenly right here, and things like that the staging potentialities don't quite seem as clear cut as the other plays that I've read with you. So some you can really imagine how it would be staged. There's a lot of potential in terms of like space that we could add action, but I also can't quite imagine it staging it today and how we'd handle it.
Yeah, it's that thing of where precisely the playwright's position is over this text as well, you mentioned earlier, and then the production's position and what's going on. Pamela, final thoughts?
Despite all of the patriarchy and nasty things, I'm really enjoying it. I would come back after the interval. What I'm finding quite fun and what I think you could really play with is the repetitions, like in the drunk scene when he would repeat all their lines, and then when someone says this is what I'm going to say to her, and then they appear and it's like, oh well, this is what I'm going to say to you. Like, you could have so much fun with all of that stuff. So I see that there are problems, absolutely, but I think you could really do something good with this.
It's a question of whether they're intentional or unintentional problems. I mean, that's where the question of intent and also of just the problem of it. It's written by a man, therefore it is inherently problematic with the context of what it is they're trying to say, and whether that fundamentally changes the meaning of what you're doing anyway, and whether you can bypass that. Elizabeth, any final thoughts?
I'm actually quite excited to see where we go from here, because all of the things that I knew from the story have happened. All the bits of the biblical narrative that I was aware of have happened, except for perhaps something a little spoiler, where most of the things that I know from the story in the Bible have happened. So we've still got half a play to go, which means there's going to be lots more action, but I'm not sure what it's going to be, so I'm quite excited for tomorrow.
Stephen, final thought?
Nothing to add, really.
Excellent. Sarah, do you have any final thought? Are you there, Sarah?
I am. Sorry, I am. I've been having trouble with Zoom today. I find David quite an interesting character. It was interesting you were saying earlier that you couldn't quite get a handle on him. To me, he's just if you strip away all the biblical stuff, which I realize is the point of it, you've got the seed of a really interesting character study of someone who's just been in power for too long, someone who's just been ruling for too long and is complacent, started off young, full of ideas, full of very idealistic and full of vim and the word of God, and has just been at it far too long, and is jaded, and is also thinking far too much about his legacy. So it's kind of like, this is what happens if you're in power for, I don't know how long he's been in power for this long at this point, but this is what happens when you rule for 30 years. Basically you end up a mess. And I'm kind of enjoying him in a really weird and twisted way. I'm interested to see what happens. I mean, I thought that last speech by Absolon was interesting, because I thought the beginnings of a revolt, a rebellion. And I mean, the only thing I know about David is, or can remember from scripture class, is gone by now. Is the whole David and Goliath thing, and then the Bathsabe thing, and that's it. So I can't remember how he dies. So I'm wondering if Absalom's maybe gonna rebel, or I don't know, but it's like you've got a really maybe not old in years, but sort of old in terms of world weariness king, and he's lost sight of what's important, and how that affects everybody else on both the personal level. Oh, and I also love the fact that after he's been told off by the prophet, and he's like, oh God, yeah, my behavior has been really, really bad. All this lust has to stop. He then immediately goes into battle, and it's about the most animated we've seen him is when he's fighting Hanon, and it's like, yay, bloodlust instead of actual lust. That'll revive my drooping spirits. And then of course that all goes pear-shaped as well.
It's interesting that David isn't presented as an out-and-out tyrant. No. People do he's given sort of admonition in by proxy, and he sort of takes it on board, and he doesn't then immediately go out and kill everyone. So
he's just been at it far too long.
So the way he's presented is within the play is quite odd. I haven't said final thoughts to a few people, but that was sort of coming off having said a few things. Anyone got any desperate final things they want to throw in? Okay, we're a little over halfway through David and Bathsabe. There's more to come, including some classic stage directions that are faves faves, definite faves. We've got more to come. That'll be coming in a video anon. We'll be doing this tomorrow to finish off the play, and hopefully you can join us. I'd just like to thank all the readers today, past and present, whether they're still here or not, and say goodbye.